Hey everyone, I'm Mitch. I'm one of the pastors here at Suncrest, and you're watching another episode of Suncrest On Demand. We're starting a brand new series of messages we're calling The Kids in Our Lives, and I can't wait for you to experience it. Let's get going.
I'm sorry, Mom, for all the endless piles of laundry. Arms up.
Sorry, Dad, for all those sleepless nights.
I'm sorry, Dad, for always getting into trouble.
I'm sorry for not giving you one moment of silence.
I'm sorry for everything.
Really sorry.
I'm sorry for always fighting with my brother.
For treating you like an ATM machine.
I can't really jump into the message without also acknowledging what happened here last weekend, right? If you weren't with us last weekend, there's no way I can describe to you what happened. And if you were here last weekend, you're probably the ones who were clapping and cheering right there, because we had one of the most crazy weekends that we've ever had at our church. You know, I started the message by showing you pictures of everyone who was baptized on Easter. There were 7 pictures. I'm like, oh, that'd be fun. Let's show everyone who was baptized last week. If today I tried to show you the pictures of everyone who was baptized last week, we'd be here for about an hour and a half, I think. Across our 3 services, this is wild to me. At first we thought 134 people were baptized, and then we found out it was 136, and then 137. And there was actually a conversation in our office on Monday that sounded a lot like an NFL team. They're like, well, let's go back to the tape and see how many people were actually baptized. But it was just incredible. And our challenge is, apparently some of you didn't fill out the card, which is what we were counting for our baptisms, and we're finding out more and more people were baptized. So it was just an incredible weekend. Can I tell you a couple things? So most wild experience for me, you know, we had this baptistry here. I'm standing here, I'm baptizing people. And when I baptize people, you all quite appropriately cheer and celebrate every time someone comes out of the water. I think it's awesome, right? But there was a moment last Thursday night when I had baptized someone, the next person gets in, and I'm just standing here, and all of a sudden you all cheer. And I'm like, wait, I haven't baptized her yet. And I turn around, and Noah's in the baptistry baptizing more people because we had to start 2 baptistries to make this thing happen. And at every service, get this, more than 10% of the people who were sitting in the room came up and were baptized. And the stories are as varied as you would expect them to be. For some people, it was almost stoic. It's like, well, it's time. It's time. I've been putting it off. It's time. It was that simple. For other people, there's stories about coming out of addiction and things like that. I've been getting stories all week. I got another one today. I'm just going to read you a small part of this. This is what someone wrote. They said, when I came up out of the water, I felt the Holy Spirit for the first time in my life. I cried because I finally understood what everyone had been talking about. I walked away from church that day with a new state of mind and new goals. And I'm like, this is it, right? People are just defining their lives in this way. So if you were baptized, I celebrate with you. I think you know our church celebrates with you. I want it to be defining for your life. I want you also to acknowledge that for many of you, most of you, I'm confident, this is a beginning, right? It's an initiation. We talked about this last week. Excuse me. And I want it to be an initiation. If you get baptized and then there's no other steps afterwards, we're doing it wrong. And so it's a very big deal to me. And if you followed my leadership last week to on the spot respond and be baptized, I want to ask you to follow my leadership this week and say, will you make sure you're part of our community? You get connected serving on a team or in a group somewhere so that church is relational for you and you have a leader in your life and you have someone to turn to for your questions and for support and you're able to support others. That is truly, truly, truly the next step of how to actually grow in our faith. And I know our staff is following up with people. It's a big deal. But man, make sure you take that step knowing it's an initiation. So celebrate what happened last week. And of course, this week, we're starting this new series called The Kids in Our Lives. I've kind of been referring to it as a parenting series. I've kind of been referring to it as not a parenting series if you're an aunt or an uncle or grandparent, all those sorts of things. I just got to be probably straight with you here at the beginning. I have resisted doing a series about parenting for about 20 years. And I'm not exaggerating. I have not done a single series on, I did individual messages once or twice because someone twisted my arm to do it. But I have a lot of hesitation actually about teaching on parenting. And it's not because I don't think it's important. I think it's outrageously important. But I want to name for you my two substantial hesitations because I think they're significant. I know it'll take a little time for why I hesitate to teach on parenting. My biggest hesitation is that there's lots of parts of my life that I don't mind being the model for. But I've been very aware as I've been a parent that I'm getting some things right and I'm getting some things wrong. And I feel unqualified to stand up here if any of you perceived like, well, Greg's nailing it as a parent. Let's just follow him. My sense from talking to people, and I have talked to people about this, is almost everyone in the room feels the same way. So I do feel some camaraderie with you in that regard. But for me in particular, and I think you can appreciate this, I want to teach in a way that's transparent, that talks about the real things in life. But there's really only one thing that I hate about being a pastor. And it's the price that my kids pay for me being a pastor. I did not expect this to be emotional, so just for a second. I signed up for this. I signed up to put my life on display and to teach and lead and let people think what they want to think about Greg. But my wife and my kids, they didn't sign up for this. And I'm afraid in teaching about parenting that the light shines on them in ways that they don't deserve. And listen, Suncrest has been great to my kids. Yeah, I don't have stories of people who are mean to my kids or hold them to some other expectation. That's not what it is. It's just the notion that they'd rather just be kids and not be Greg's sons or daughter. And so I've hesitated for that reason and in ways that I feel a lot. I feel like a lot of my stories over this series are not going to be about my kids. That's what I'm telling you. Some of the stories will be about my parents. My parents were awesome parents. I have two brothers. If you met them, you would think, they're a lot like Greg. And they are. We're all very similar because of our parents. And part of what I mean by that is we all are people of faith. We're all leading our families in that way. We've all been married to our first wives for more than 20 years. We're all raising our kids in the faith. I mean, my parents, it blows me away. Whatever they did, I can't quite figure it out. But I'm going to let the stories live there. So my second hesitation, to move off the personal side, about teaching on parenting is that I feel uneasy or maybe even queasy about the industry that is parenting advice. There's so much parenting advice out there. Some of you are following influencers on Instagram and you're reading books and we get pitched like, bring this seminar to your church, bring this speaker, this one, they have all the answers. And whenever they say they have all the answers, that's why I'm uneasy about it. I watch parenting advice, and this is actually an industry within Christianity too, within the church world. And that makes me even more uneasy because what I see is people coming up with the thing they think is great, some technique, and it may not be bad, but it's not from the Bible. That doesn't mean they can't find a verse in the Bible that they can slap on their program and call it biblical advice. People do that all the time. And as someone who takes seriously teaching the scriptures in a way that is faithful to the scriptures, not just deciding what I wanted to say and then finding some verses to support it. All of that makes me uneasy. And I don't think the scriptures, honestly, do that much technical training on parenting. I don't think they do. And so in this series, you're not going to get any silver bullets on parenting. You're not going to get 3 guarantees for effective discipline. You're not going to get that. We're going to live up a little loftier than that and aim at some things the scriptures definitely aim us at. And I hope that you feel guided and supported and like you have a community that would walk with you so that we all get better at leading the kids in our lives. Now, I've been mentioning the kids in our lives isn't just parenting. It includes grandparents, aunts, uncles, all those things. I actually want to start with this question, and I want every one of you to answer it. Who are the kids in your life? So if you're a parent raising kids right now, and you can define that however you want, you should put their names in that blank. They belong there. But if you're not a parent raising kids right now, if there's no kids in your home, then I want you to take some time over the next 4 weeks to truly think, well, who are the kids in your life? Sometimes that's organic a little bit. It might be your grandchildren or your nieces or nephews, it might be a younger brother, it might be a neighbor. Some of the greatest people in my 5-year-old's life are the people who live right behind us across their fence. And every time he's out on our play set, she's coming out with some kind of snack, some kind of cookie. He wants to stop at their house, Halloween. I'm like, my goodness, thank God for neighbors who don't have kids of their own and don't have local grandkids who are caring about my kids. And for you, I think, who are the kids in your lives? Sometimes it's not organic, something like that. Sometimes it's an organized thing. You might be a teacher in a school system. You might be volunteering with the Boys and Girls Club or with Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts. I applaud you for taking your time and your effort and investing in the next generation of our world. I want you to think about who the kids are in your lives. Some of you have become foster parents. That's part of our story. And in our story right now, our oldest son, Terrell, has biological siblings that live in the area. And we've just decided that we want them over at our house every Monday night. And they eat a lot of food. And I love it. Because if I was going to tell you who are the kids in my life, of course I have my kids. But there's a few names on there. Like, no, that's who I'm aiming at. That's who I think God has called me to be an influence in their life. Some of you serve in Suncrest kids here and in Suncrest students here. God bless you. Are those people not the heroes of our church around here who would invest in the next generation? I got to tell you a quick story. When my daughter was 3rd or 4th grade, at the stage where she was thinking about being baptized, and she was getting ready to take that step, someone asked her, like, hey, who would you like to baptize you? And she said, well, I've been thinking about it. She said, maybe Dad or maybe Mr. Doug. And Mr. Doug was the leader in her classroom. Now, I will tell you that I scheduled her baptism for a week that Mr. Doug was out of town. Because I want to baptize my own daughter, okay? However, I love Mr. Doug, right? That he's the kind of person who said he's got kids in his life and he's aiming and shaping their lives. It's so powerful. Jesus was not a parent, but he valued children because he knew the value of children. That what we do as we shape them when they're young will shape the next generations of our world. And I want all of us to embrace, parents or not, the notion that we have a responsibility to the next generation. And the latest research on this is strong, particularly in the faith realm. Did you know one of the greatest predictors of whether a young person will grow up with a strong faith is whether they have at least one, just has to be one, but at least one adult in their life who is not their parent, who is helping to lead them to faith. This is, of course, the power of the church, but it's the power of you who are serving with students and with kids. So, who are the kids in your life? I want to honor a couple things. This is from Deuteronomy. It says, do not forget the things your eyes have seen, or let them fade from your heart, as long as you live. Don't lose sight of these things. Teach them to your children and to their children after them. Can I just tell you about my grandparents? I have 2 grandfathers. Of course, they both passed now, but they were in my life as I was growing up. They were both good men. I honored both of them, but they weren't the same in my life. One of my grandfathers I knew essentially from a distance because he was in his chair and I was everywhere else in the house. And I knew that he served at our church and he was a leader in our community and he started a business and he employed people and all those sorts of things. He's a good man. We weren't close. And then there was my Grandpa Bloom. And my Grandpa Bloom was the one who would pitch us wiffle balls until it was dark at night. He's the one who taught me how to shoot pool. He's the one who took me out to drive in his car when I was like 13 years old, before my parents would ever consider that. He'd put me behind the driver's seat. He invested in my life. When I was baptized, my grandpa and Grandma Bloom gave me this Bible, my most treasured possession. And when I decided that I had a calling on my life to be a pastor, he was my biggest fan. My biggest fan. And I think, man, this isn't my dad, this isn't my mom. They're great. But oh my goodness, if you would aim at having an influence on the kids in our lives, it can change everything. So with that in mind, let me name something that might be obvious to you, but it's worth coming back to. The superpower of every person, everyone in this room, is that you and I get to set the aim of our life. We get to decide what the most important things in our life are and what we're aiming at, the purpose of our lives. This is actually a gift God has given to you. We call it free will from a theological standpoint, that you get to decide. And a lot of times we think, oh, yeah, I get to decide. I get to decide if I'm having, burgers or brats. I get to decide how I'm going to react in the middle of a fight with my wife. We get those decisions. But actually, the biggest decisions, the superpower that you have, is you get to set the aim of your life. And last week, I invited many of you to say, hey, if the defining aspect of your life is that you're a follower of Jesus, would you come up here and get baptized, right? And many of you did. And this is the superpower that we have. We make a decision and we come out and it says, it changes my goals. And I don't know if you think about what you're aiming at in life, but the greatest superpower you have is to decide, that's what I'm going after. That's what's important to me. And it's easy in the daily grind of things to lose sight of the most important things. We are drawn down into the muck, into schedules and calendars and emails and everything else. But it is the power of our lives to set our aim. The scriptures talk about this constantly. I'm going to give you a few ideas here. They usually use the word, I use the word focus, and you'll see how these all kind of get at that. It says, set your minds on something. Set your minds on things above, not the little things, not the earthly things. It says, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus. And deciding that if I'm following Jesus, everything else fits underneath that. That's the thing. That's the thing I have to stay focused on. It says, so we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but what is unseen. Since what is seen is temporary, but what's unseen is eternal. And you and I get to decide whether we do this or not. Am I going to get kind of wrapped up in the day in, day out life? I'm going to spend hours on my phone or on Netflix, whatever's I'm going to give my attention to. Or am I aiming at something? Something noble, something big, something defining. One thing I do, forgetting what is behind and straining toward what is ahead, I press on toward the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus. This is the aiming power of our lives. You have been given a superpower to decide what are the most important things in life for you to aim at. And this will not surprise you. The biggest regrets in life, the way people get to their end of their life and regret the life that they lived, is that they either aimed wrong or they didn't aim at all. It's Henry David Thoreau who said, it's one of my favorite quotes, you've heard me say it before, Most men lead lives of quiet desperation, and they go to their grave with the song still in them. Why? Because either they didn't aim, or they knew what they should do, and they frittered their life away anyway. And the superpower of our lives is that we get to aim. Can I give you just an image? These scriptures that I just read to you, I've actually been sharing with our staff and with our elders lately because it was at our staff meeting on the first Tuesday of March when I said to our staff out loud after feeling a little trepidation, saying, hey, I think over the next 2 months, God is leading us to aim at seeing people baptized, at seeing people define their life. Like you might think that last weekend was in a vacuum, like, I don't know, Greg thought maybe a baptism sermon and we do this. But for a month, we've been aiming at this. We went through our database and we found every person that we know in our database who isn't baptized, but they're in a group. Every person in our database who isn't baptized, but on a serving team. And we asked all of our group leaders and everyone on a serving team to talk to those people and say, hey, would you consider taking this step? What's holding you back? Are you ready for that step? We, as you know, last week as a church, we fasted. We set our aim. We prayed to God and hungered for him to do something out. And you may not know this, but the week before that, I asked all of our leaders to fast and pray for a supernatural act of God to happen last week. And so we set the course in March and we say we're going to fix our eyes, not on things that are seen, but things that are unseen. We're going to fix our eyes on Jesus. We get to decide. You get to decide where you set your aim. It's such a power. And you think, Greg, isn't this supposed to be a parenting series? Yeah. The superpower of every parent is setting your aim for your kids. How exactly should you discipline your children? I can give you 5 different opinions. But here's what I know in a message from God. He gave you the power to think, how do I want my children to end up? What are the values that I want to make sure are embedded in them? What is the most important part of their development? And you get to decide, what are you aiming at? And then you start to chase it. And I understand, trust me, I understand, that it is so easy to get drawn out of these lofty, purpose, aim conversations. Because, I don't know if you've noticed this, but parenting is tiring. It consumes our energy. It consumes our time. There's more laundry. There's more kids to feed. There's more errands to run. There's more places to take kids. There's more sports to sign up for. There's actually more friends to keep up with. There's a lot that's going on while we're parenting. It's the most hectic season of our life. But if you let the hecticness of parenting draw you down so that you aren't aiming, then you're giving away your superpower. Have you decided for the kids in your life, what is the most important thing for them to grow up with? Do you have values as a family that you say, if nothing else, and we can't do 50 things, but if nothing else, our kids are going to end up with these 3 values, these 2 values, this one value in their life? Have you intentionally decided how you're spending the time of your family? How you're spending your attention as a parent on what you're studying to get better at so that when you're called to lead your kids, you're leading them intentionally, aimed at the big things in life. I'm sure some of you have seen this illustration before. I'm going to try to do it very quickly here. This will mess me up if I don't turn it the right way. Stephen Covey wrote a book called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's a wonderful book about productivity. One of his habits is first things first, and he pretty consistently uses this illustration. He says, you can think about the things in your lives, and we all have little things in our lives. They're the everyday stuff. Kids' noses have to get wiped, and You have to do all the little stuff. And then we have kind of medium-sized things in our lives, and we all would like to make sure, that we make some memories on a vacation and, things like that. And these are not unimportant things. They're certainly not bad things. They're good things, and you're trying to put them all in your life. And then we all have some foundational things in our lives that are illustrated by these bricks, and to say, hey, you definitely don't want to get to the end of your life without having those bricks laid down. What are your key values? What are your main aims for your children? What are you trying to develop in them more than anything else? But then what happens is we try to fit all of this into our life. And when all the little things take precedence, and then we want to throw a few other things that are pretty important too, it's entirely possible that the most important things in our lives get crowded out. They don't fit. They're kind of required to go to the back burner. And the idea of first things first is that you say, there's a different way to organize your life. You could take the big things of your life, and if you put them in first, and I don't know what these are for you, and I don't know if I'm going to get this right. Hopefully it all fits. I don't know what these are for you. We're all sitting in church together. So let me at least suggest that one of these is developing the faith of your children. That among all the things you could do as a parent, you would prioritize that one above, well, maybe above everything else. Now, we can test ourselves with this. We can look at our calendars. We can look at our priorities. We can look at how we spend our money and say, is what I say the most important thing really the most important thing? But this is a pretty cool thing, because if you put the big things in first, then you can usually put the medium-sized things in too. They'll go around them somewhere. It'll fit in there. And then actually, by the time it's all said and done, you can still wipe kids' noses. Right? You can do all the little things. You might have to shake it up a little bit, but it'll fit. And honestly, if a few don't fit, those are no big deal. Right? It's the big things. The first things first. What is the aim of our lives? And the scriptures speak to this, specifically about parenting and leadership. Think about these scriptures when it comes to you as a parent. Let your eyes, as a parent, look straight ahead. Fix your gaze directly before you. Give careful thought to the paths of your feet, and be steadfast in all your ways. Listen, I was a youth pastor for a while here at our church a long time ago. And I would talk to parents, and they would just come to me with regrets. They'd say, oh, my teenager, faith doesn't seem important to them. And I would just ask. I'd say, well, tell me the story of childhood. And then they'd tell me the story. And they would talk about all the things they prioritized in childhood over faith. I said, I know it's hard. I know. But if that's the most important thing, and if you're not a follower of Jesus, maybe it's not the most important thing. You have to choose your own brick. You get to choose. That's the power you have. You get to choose the most important things you want your kids to grow up with. You get to choose what you pray for in their lives, and you get to choose what you sign them up for. But you set your path. So set it right. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. And all these other things will be added to you as well. It's hard sometimes to know what values you're aiming at. But if you start at what I believe is the pinnacle of godly values, everything else fits after that. Fix these words this is from Deuteronomy. Fix these words of mine in your hearts and on your minds. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. What's happening here? He's saying, hey, take the most important things of life. Take the laws of God. Make sure that they're a part of your life. Like, get a tattoo. That's what he's saying. Get a tattoo with it on it so you remind yourself. And then teach them to your children. Talking about it when you sit at home, and when you walk along the road, and when you lie down, and when you get up. What's he saying? He's saying, while you're taking them to practice, have these conversations, because it's what you're aiming at, right? While you're putting them to bed, while you're giving them a bath, have these conversations, because this is what you're aiming at, right? But how ludicrous would it be to say, this is the aim of my life, and then never or limit your engagement to that? The passage goes on. It says, write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates, so that your days and the days of your children will honor God. And what he's suggesting is, hey, you set the aim of your life and then you integrate it into your whole life. And you pay attention. And you look and say, is it possible that I'm prioritizing some of the wrong things in my kid's life? Not bad things, but not best things. Is it possible that I'm placing them into certain relationships that aren't the best relationships for them? And you only get one run at this. But you get to decide who your kids hang around. You get to decide where your kids have their sleepovers. You get to decide. This isn't your kid's decision. This is your decision. Where they go to school, how connected they are at church, whether they see you reading your Bible, all those things. You get to decide. Of course, the classic parenting passage says essentially the same thing. Start children off on the way they should go, and even when they're old, they will not turn from it. So, this is my question. What is the primary aim for the kids in your life? I don't actually expect most of you to be able to answer that on the spot. I'm actually giving you a discussion question. If you're married, if you're raising kids with someone else, let's have this conversation together. Let's step back and say, have we ever talked about this? You know, our superpower is to decide what we're aiming our kids' lives at. What are we aiming our kids' lives at? How do we want them to end up in adulthood? What are the values we want to make sure our family has embedded in us? What are the character traits that I'm trying to make sure my children display 10, 15 years from now? What is the aim of our lives? And you can spend the rest of this series asking God about that, sorting that out, but the power is in deciding, not letting it stay murky, not saying I'll get to it later. That's the path to regret. What is the primary aim? And let me give you a couple categories here. You can think about a primary aim for their development. So our kids have to develop in their faith. Our kids have to develop academically. Our kids have to develop artistically. Our kids have to develop athletically. Our kids have to develop academically or financially. Like, there's lots of places where we're trying to develop kids. You get to decide which is the most important. You get to decide which will get your attention. And it probably feels right now like the pastor is telling you to yank your kid out of travel baseball so he can come to church. I'm kind of saying that, just so you know. There's nothing evil about travel baseball. Nothing. In fact, if your primary development is to say, I'm trying to develop an athlete here. I think my goal for my kid is that he plays in the major leagues. Then it absolutely makes sense for that to go in this blank, if that's what your aim is. But I'm just asking you, do not regret 20 years from now. That what you think you would like, but the decisions you are making in everyday life were inconsistent with each other. And now you live with regret. You can aim not just at development, but at the primary values that are reflected in your family. You know, I taught my kids all along the way. I said, hey, what does it mean to be part of the Lee family? Well, to me, it just means two things, honestly. In the Lee family, we are generous, and in the Lee family, we take responsibility. There's 100 other good values that you might want to aim your family in. That's just what we decided to aim ours at. We're going to be generous people. That's what we're going to do. When there's a need, we're going to decide God probably wants to use us in some way to step in. And we're going to be people who take responsibility. We're not blaming other people. We are not victims. We're going to take responsibility for us. And when life is good enough for us that we can take on responsibility for other people, we'll do that too. In the Lee family, we value generosity and taking responsibility. What do you value? Jenny and I had a conversation when we were young parents. And we kind of asked ourselves the question, like what's kind of the emotion or the feeling that we want to mark our home? What is it? We get to decide what we're aiming at. And our answer to that question was laughter. That's what we're aiming at. It may not be what you're aiming at. And newsflash to all of you, our home is not consistently marked by laughter. It's just what we're aiming at. See, this is the point, actually. That setting your aim doesn't mean you always hit the target. What it means is you know what you're aiming at. And so, since you will miss the target, if you're anything like me, here's what it really means to set your aim. It does mean you can celebrate when you do hit the target. And I can promise you there's nothing more powerful in your family than what gets celebrated. And one of the things I recognized about my parents after I got into adulthood and started raising kids of my own is that my parents never celebrated results. You know, I was on some championship teams. I would never hear my mom or dad say, "You're the best because you won the championship." They would always celebrate process and progress. "Greg, I'm proud of you for working hard. Greg, I'm proud of you because I saw how you were a good teammate out there." They were celebrating things they wanted to get reinforced in my life. And it wasn't that I won the championship. It was who I was becoming. So when you set your aim and then you hit the aim and there is laughter in your home, you can say, "Isn't it great that we laugh like this? Let's celebrate that." And when you set your aim and you miss your aim, you calibrate, or you might say recalibrate when you don't. Because this is a healthy jostling thing that I think comes from the Spirit of God. I'm setting our aim. This is my goal. This is the primary values of our life. This is the primary development I want in my children. Oh, wait, it's not working. I'm not seeing it. Our home's not marked by laughter. My kids aren't taking responsibility, even though that's one of the values of our home. But that is the very moment it jostles you to say, well, if that's my aim, and the parenting that I've been doing has been getting this, I guess I need to change my parenting. I mean, this is the definition of insanity, right? Is to keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect different results. And so if you know your aim, if you know your purpose, if you know the most important thing for your kids' lives, if you know the values you're trying to embed in them, and if you know the feeling you want your home to have, you won't always hit it. But when you don't hit it, it's the perfect opportunity to acknowledge you didn't hit it and say, I'm going to have to change how I'm parenting right now, because it would be unacceptable for me just to follow the path that is not getting me where I'm aimed.
Starting this weekend is our Spring Compassion offering. What does that mean? Well, every dollar that you give in partnership with us is going to meet local needs in our community. It helps partners like Habitat for Humanity, the Down Syndrome Association, and so much more. So I want to invite all of us, 100% of us, in person and online to participate in this. How can you do that? By going to suncrest.org/give this week and give a gift financially. You can use your money to change lives this week.
testimony from death to life. 'Cause grace rewrote my story. I'll testify by Jesus Christ the righteous. I'll testify. This is my testimony. This is my testimony. Sons and daughters, bought with blood and washed in water. Sing the praises of the Spirit, Son and Father. Our God will finish what He started. Oh, our God will finish what He started. This is my testimony from death to life. 'Cause grace rewrote my story. I'll testify by Jesus Christ the righteous. I'll testify. This is my testimony. This is my testimony. If I'm not dead, you're not done. Greater things are still to come. Oh, I believe. If I'm not dead, you're not done. Greater things are still to come. Oh, I believe. If I'm not dead, you're not done. Greater things are still to come. Oh, I believe. If I'm not dead, you're not done. Greater things are still to come. Oh, I believe. This is my testimony from death to life. 'Cause grace rewrote my story. I'll testify by Jesus Christ the righteous. I'm justified. This is my testimony. Oh, I'm alive. This is my testimony from death to life. 'Cause grace rewrote my story. I'll testify by Jesus Christ the righteous. I'll testify. This is my testimony. This is my testimony.
Every week, we pause everything we do, both in person and on demand, to focus on the love of Jesus during a time of communion. It's where in person we take bread and juice, but on demand and online, go ahead and find whatever food and drink you have available to you. This is a moment for those of us who follow Jesus to reflect, refuel, and refocus us on Jesus' love and His sacrifice on the cross. If you're watching this and you wouldn't call yourself someone who follows Jesus, or you're simply just exploring, I'm glad you're watching, because Suncrest is a safe environment for you to wrestle with your questions about following Jesus alongside lots of other people on the same journey as you. I'm going to put a timer and subscription on the screen here shortly, and I want to invite all of us to reflect and eat and drink when you're ready. Thanks for tuning into this episode of Suncrest On Demand. If you'd like to hit the like button, if you want to see more content like this from Suncrest Church, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel. And if you know a parent, friend, parental figure in a kid's life who needs to hear this, go ahead and hit the share button on whatever social media platform you are using. Now, I hope you partner with us financially this week as well as we do our Spring Compassion offering where every dollar is given to make a difference and meet local needs. Before we see you next time, I hope that you experience the change that only comes from following Jesus. Bye now.